Anvil is a platform for building full stack web applications with nothing but Python. So you don't need to know HTML, you don't need to know CSS or JavaScript or SQL, you just need to know Python. So I'm going to show you in this webinar how we can integrate the Mapbox GLJS library into an Anvil app using Python. And so I'm going to show you this app that I've built, which we're going to build a kind of a version of this. So I'll show you just what I've done already. So this is an app that I built with Anvil using Python and using the Mapbox GLJS library and the Isochrone API and the geocoder plugins. So I'll just give you a little tour, a little preview of what we're going to be building, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about Anvil. So this is just a map that I've added. I have this geocoder here, which lets us search for a place. I've added a marker to the map, which moves when we move. And then these isochrone lines, which I'm getting from the Isochrone API, show us how far we can get given a certain amount of time and a method of travel. So I've added these drop-down menus. This is all in Anvil, which call the Isochrone API and expand or shrink our isochrone lines based on what we input in there. So in this live stream, I'm going to show you how to build an app like this. Full disclosure, I did use a little bit of HTML and CSS to style this app to make it look nice. So the app that we'll end up with at the end of this live stream won't look exactly like this, but it'll have the same functionality because I don't really have time to show you all that, but it's just a little bit of CSS.
Fair enough. And
Yeah.
let me cut in for a moment to remind folks to log into Twitch too. If you have questions, Brooke will be answering questions. So if you have questions about Anvil or how the platform works, make sure to log into Twitch and type your questions in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about Anvil. So my background is not in web development. I have a background in linguistics and natural language processing and machine learning. So I'm someone who knows Python, but I don't know a lot of other web development stuff. So a lot of our users are like that. They're people from data science or machine learning. So they're people who have projects, they have models, they have data that they want out on the web. They want people to be able to interact with it, but they don't necessarily know the 5 different languages you need to know and the 3 different frameworks you need to know just to build and deploy a website or a web application. We also have a lot of users that are coming from traditional web dev who are maybe a bit exhausted about the process, and they find that they can use Anvil and get the same result in a fraction of the time and the cost. So we're all really about making web development more accessible to people. So flattening that learning curve and breaking down some of the barriers to getting into web development. And so the reason that I've built this app with Mapbox is 2 reasons. One, to show that you can use JavaScript libraries in Python in Anvil. And also because, as I said, a lot of our users are data scientists. We have people using geospatial data. I'm actually going to briefly show an example of one of our users who uses Mapbox to show his data. So yeah, we have users that are interested in this kind of data and like Mapbox. So yeah, so I made this app to show that off. So as Dom said, you can code along if you'd like. So I have this link, anvil.work/sign-up, or you can just go to anvil.work/build, which I think is in the Twitch chat, and that'll allow you to sign up for an account if you want to code along. It's free. You don't have to code along if you don't want to, because it might be a little fast if it's your first time, but I'll try to explain everything as I go along. So to give you some time to sign up if you'd like to, and to kind of show a little bit more about what Anvil can do. I have a few slides just on some examples of what Anvil's been used for. So I have, this is the user that I've been talking about, our customer, Robert Ritz. He's really active with Anvil. He's a teacher in Mongolia, and he actually uses Anvil with his class, but he also tracks CO2 production, and air pollution in Mongolia and Ulaanbaatar. And so these are some screenshots of one of his Anvil apps that uses the Plotly plotting library, which is integrated in Anvil to show the production of CO2 over time. And here's another one of his where he uses Mapbox to track air pollution over Ulaanbaatar and over time as well. So a lot of data scientists are using data like this in Anvil. This is an app that my colleague Bridget made. So I'm just going to have this little video where she kind of goes through it. I hope the video is playing for people. But
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so it's just a tool for managing customer support tickets that come in. So she has email. So email is integrated in Anvil. So emails that are coming into the system are in the app, and you can actually email out of the app. So that's all handled by Anvil. So she's just kind of quickly showing us how it works. It's not super important, but just an example of a really full-fledged application with a lot of functionality, and obviously it's styled really nicely that she's done. So I'll just move on because it's kind of a, let's see. This is an example of an online shop that I included because I built it, and I guess I was hungry that day, so I made a little fake cupcake shop. So just showing you can have products, add them to a cart, delete them from a cart, and we have an integration with Stripe, which is a purchasing API. So checkout is handled securely, and you can bring up a checkout form, just one line of code, and then you would have a Stripe account where you can see all your purchases, payments that have gone through, and it's all secure. So a lot of things like that are just built into Anvil already. And then here's another one. This is one of our users. He makes in-store product catalogs for stores. He actually uses machine learning to parse CSV files that are coming from manufacturers that have all this product data that's it's apparently very messy and hard to sort through. So he has this company that sorts through that data using natural language processing. And then if you have a furniture store, for example, that data is already handled for you, and it's displayed, all the products are displayed on the iPad catalog that you have in store to show customers what you have. So it's just another example of a real world application of Anvil. And if you're interested, I have some links to our blog. We also have an examples page, which is more Anvil employees like me showing off features and builds of what you can do with Anvil. So I just want to make it clear that it's not a no-code or low-code tool. So we'll see as I go through the build that it's not one of those we're using Python the whole time. It's just that there are some of the messier parts of web development are handled with Anvil. And I think that's my last one. Yeah. So if you do want to code along, you can. You don't have to. You'll need an Anvil account, which is free, and you'll need a Mapbox access token, which I'm assuming most people here have. So there's a link there again in the chat, and I'll just go over briefly what we're going to do again. We're going to create a blank Anvil app, so we're going to start completely from scratch. We're going to import the Mapbox GLJS library. We're going to use that from Python to add a map and a marker onto our app. We're going to add a geocoder so we can search for places. We're going to add the Isochrone API. We're going to make requests to that to get those Isochrone lines that we can display on our map. And then we're going to build a simple UI to query the API to give it the parameters that we want, the amount of time and how we want to go. So it's a pretty basic app. It's not going to be super complex, but I don't have that much time. So if I don't know if anybody has any questions now, or I can just dive in and start building.
Yeah, folks are commenting that the platform looks really versatile.
Awesome.
I think Use Python has it just ready to go. Okay,
good. All right, let's do it. Let me just go here. I'll go to anvil.org/build. Okay, so I'm going to start with a new blank app. There's different themes we can choose. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to do the material design theme. Okay, so this is the Anvil designer. So every Anvil app starts with a form already added. You can see this form here and here. This lightning bolt indicates that it's our startup form. So when I run the app, this is the form that's going to display. Anvil is a drag and drop designer. So we have components here in the toolbox that we can just drag and drop on the page. So we could put a label here if we wanted to. Down here is the properties panel. So this is where we can change the properties of the component that we've added. Every component in Anvil is a Python object. So we can also interact with it in code, which we'll see in a second. But everything's a Python object. Even the form that we're putting on is a Python object. So I'll just change the text property for this, and I can never type when people are watching, but I did well with that, I think. So if we run this, this app is already live at a private URL. So I can run this and I can see this is what the app looks like. And if I wanted to publish it, make it public, there's this button here, which brings up this modal, but I can also do it from inside the app. And I can publish it and make it live, and that's deployment taken care of. So I'm actually gonna make it live. I'm gonna change, there's a random word generator that makes the best URLs, but I will just change this to Mapbox livestream.anvil.app. So if anybody wants to watch the app being built, you can go to this URL. If Dom, if you can put that in the chat for me, thank you.
You got it.
You will have to reload the app though to see the changes. So just apply, and then now that's a public app and it's deployed, and that's it. So before I start with the actual Mapbox stuff, I'm just going to really briefly kind of go through the basics of Anvil. So we have this label that I've added. I'm just going to add a button. So I'm going to show you how we can have a button that we click, and it's going to change the text of the label that we added. So here's our button. I can change the text on the button. I can actually change the appearance of it if I want. And then scrolling down here, these are the events that we can have for this component. So I'm going to register a click event. So I just click these arrows and it's going to automatically create this function. So this is our code for the form. As you can see, our form is a class. So it's already set up for us there. And this click is a method within our form class. So I can just, within the click event, I can say self.button.one. That's the button that we added. Actually, not the button. I want the label. What am I talking about? Okay, now the text property of the label. So whenever the button's clicked, we can change the text. So let's see if this works. And there, the text has changed. So that's all that we have to do to have a button and an event handler and change the text. So it's just it's a pointless example, but just to show you basically how Anvil works. I'm just going to get rid of that for now and start with the actual purpose of us being here, which is to put Mapbox in a web app with nothing but Python. So the first thing that we need to do is actually import the library, the JavaScript library. So I have I'm going to do a lot of copying and pasting, just so you know now. This is the Mapbox GLJS API reference. This is just the quick start. So I'm just copying and pasting here these script tags, which are loading in the JavaScript library and the CSS files. So we don't need to write any HTML, but we are going to have to stick this HTML into our app. So I didn't really lie, but there is a little bit of HTML. So in our app, scrolling down here to native libraries, this is where we can put any code into the head tag of our app. So if I just stick this here, this will be in the HTML of our page, and we can now import Mapbox GL. So I can do that from our code of our form. So I have to do from anvil.js.window. So this is the window into our JavaScript namespace. So if I import Mapbox GL, we can now use that in our code. And I'm going to sneakily import anvil.js because we're going to see that we're going to need that in a second. And I don't want to forget about that. Okay, so let's go back to this quick start. This is the code just for adding a map, pretty basic. So it's adding a div here in the HTML. So adding an element with the ID of map, and that's the container for this map object. So I'm going to copy just the JavaScript, and I'm going to show you how we can really easily convert JavaScript to Python and Anvil. And we're going to have to change this container because we're not going to use HTML. We're not going to add a div. We're just going to add a regular Anvil component and use that as our container instead. So if I go back to the app, let's actually add that container so we can put the map into something. So I'm just going to add a spacer. The reason I'm adding a spacer is just normally used to just keep two elements apart if you wanted to, but I'm going to use it because it has no design elements to it. It's pretty blank, and I can just drag the height really easily. But I can also set the height in code if I want to. So I could set it in the designer and I can set it in code as well. So that's just going to be our container, this spacer. So normally when we make an Anvil app and we want something to run before as the app loads, we put it in the init of the class. But in this case, we want that spacer to be fully initialized before we actually add the map to the page. So I hope that makes sense. So we want the spacer there. So we're going to actually not add the map until the page is fully loaded. And the way we're going to do that is I'll go back to the designer. So I'm going to click here. So this gets me the form. So you can see this self tells me that I'm dealing with the form. So if I clicked on the spacer, it would say self.spacer1. So clicking here, so we're on the form and scrolling back down to events, just like we did with the button. So I'm going to make a form show event. So clicking these arrows. So this is what's going to run when the form is shown. So after the init and when the form is on page. So I've copied and pasted that JavaScript code, which I'm going to add there. So we're setting our Mapbox token. Here we don't need this var keyword because that's JavaScript nonsense. So we can just, I'm going to get this self.map so that we can use the map object elsewhere in our class. We don't need new. That's also something that Python doesn't do. So anything in JavaScript that is dictionary-like can be used as a dictionary in Python. So what we're going to have to do, though, is change these keys to strings, because otherwise Python is going to look for a variable that's called container or style, and it's not going to find anything, and it's going to throw an error. So I just have to change those to strings. Obviously, get rid of these comments because they are not comments in Python.
A question.
Yes.
So you're converting the Python to JavaScript on runtime.
Yeah, so the so I'm so this is the client code that's running. I'm not sure if this is a question exactly, but this is the client code. So we use an open source project called Sculpt, which is a Python to JavaScript compiler. So this is our client, and I'm just going to use the JavaScript library from Python, and then it does get converted back into JavaScript running on the browser. If that answers the question. I think by that response, I think it does. Okay. So hopefully I haven't screwed something up and I can run this and there should be a map. Oops, nope. What did I do? Oh, right. I got thrown off. Okay. So we added that spacer on the page for a reason. So we actually have to get the DOM node of that spacer. So we have to get that spacer from the HTML, and then that can be our container. So not using that HTML div element before. Now when I run this, okay, good. Okay. So now we have this map that's zoomed to the middle of New Jersey for some reason. So it's the default. So I'm going to add a marker to the map. So just kind of going over again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy and paste. Nothing too fancy, but just showing again how we can convert it to Python. So I'm going to copy this JavaScript code. Coming here, I'm going to paste it still in the form show event because we want it to all show at the beginning. So no comments, var, no var. We want a self.marker again because we'll use it elsewhere in our class. New, we don't need. If you do need to call the new keyword, there is a way to do that, but we don't need to do that there. So I'm just getting rid of that. Again, keys to strings, and then Python needs true to be capitalized to recognize that as a Boolean. So I'm also going to have to change the formatting here a little bit because this add to map won't be registered. There we go. And we want self.map because that's our map object. So let's run, let's see if there's a map marker. I'm afraid every time I do this, it's gonna not work. Oh, I know why, because the longitude and latitude are different places. So let's actually, I don't want, no offense to New Jersey. I mean, a lot of offense to New Jersey. I don't want New Jersey. Let's,
well, you're in Old Jersey now.
Yeah,
okay.
That's true. I'm from the East Coast, so I think I'm allowed. So now, there we go. There's our marker in Kiev. That's better. Okay. So that's it. So now we have a map. We have this running live with a map and a marker, and that's it. So now I want to add a geocoder so that we can actually search the map. Surprise, surprise. Let's copy and paste some code, which I already have highlighted here for my for my ease of use. So this is again just from a tutorial on the Mapbox documentation. So the good thing, if you're using something like Mapbox that has really good documentation and a lot of examples, it's not too hard to translate the JavaScript to Python. So props to Mapbox for that, because I've read a lot of documentation in my time, and it's not always that fun. But yeah, so it's not too bad. So actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so we've copied and pasted this. Going back to native library, same thing we did with the Mapbox GLJS library, pasting that. Now again, we can now import the geocoder. So this is just adding the geocoder plugin into our HTML. Go back to form, import Mapbox GL, and then I'm also going to do Mapbox geocoder. I think I spelled that correctly. Okay, so now I've imported both of those, which means that we can now make a geocoder. So this time I'm actually not going to copy and paste because it's really easy. So I'm going to make a self.geocoder variable, Mapbox geocoder. We need to add our access token, which we've already set there. So I'll just use that. And then I'll just make sure it doesn't add a marker. I'm not sure if it will, but that way, since we've already added a marker, it won't do that. Okay, and then we just need to add it to our map. Okay, again, I'm afraid I'm going to run this and nothing's going to appear. Oh, it's good. Okay. So now this should work. So I'm based in Cambridge. So let's see. And lovely flyover feature. And there we are. But the marker doesn't move. So the next thing that we can do is we can register an event. So when the geocoder gets a result, so when we search for a place and there's a result, we can actually pull the coordinates from that and then set the marker coordinates to that new location. So let's now set an event handler for when the geocoder gets a result. So we'll do .on results. So that's when the result event is triggered, then we want to call some sort of function. So I'm just going to call it move marker because that's what we want to do. In Python, we're going to have to set this, well, in Anvil, I mean, we're going to have to set this, define this function outside of the form show event. So we can't just define it there like in JavaScript. So I'm now going to define move marker so that we can actually call it. And anything, so whatever the results from this result event is, whatever the geocoder gives us is going to be passed into this function. So I'm just going to have to add another argument here. And for now, let's actually just print whatever that result is so that we can see what we're dealing with. And then I can also show you what happens when we print. So let's go somewhere else. So here, this is our console here. So anything that's printed will appear here in the output. This will also remain when we stop running our app. We can still see it here. So what we're looking for are the coordinates, which are here. And so we're going to pull them out of this result. So if you notice, this is proxy object here. So anything in JavaScript that can directly be translated into Python, like a string or a Boolean or an integer or something like that, that will be the exact same type in Python. Anything else will be a proxy object. But if it's dictionary-like or list-like, it can still be interacted with as a dictionary or list. So this is still, even though it says proxy object, it's still dictionary-like. So we'll use it as a dictionary. So we want to set the longitude and latitude coordinates of our markers. I'm just going to make a variable that pulls that. So we want result as this first key. Oops. from there, I think we need geometry somewhere, and then coordinates. Yep, geometry and then coordinates. Okay, so that should be this list of coordinates, and then we can say self.marker dot set ling lat, and then we'll set it to that variable, which should be those coordinates. Okay, again, hopefully I did everything right, and we can see if our marker moves to where we search. Yay, okay, beautiful.
Nice.
And it's still draggable. So that's all that it took to register that event. So now we can do the Isochrone API. So the first thing in order to do that is we're going to have to import anvil.http. So this is going to allow us to use methods that can allow us to request the Isochrone API. So I'm going to go to, actually, let's first create a function. So let's create a function that gets those isochrone lines. So it makes a request to the API and returns that, and then we can use that to display on the map. So I'll just define a function. We don't need any arguments. So we need whatever the coordinates are of the marker, wherever it is, that's what we're going to use. So wherever the marker is, we want those coordinates. And then we can use those to request the API. So to request the API, I just need to do anvil.http, which we just imported, .request. And then I'm gonna copy and paste the request from the tutorial, but I'm gonna make it an F string, which we'll see why in a second. So I'm just going to use this example, which has some hard-coded arguments. So let's just go back here. So if I paste this long string, let me actually make this wider. Okay, so it's got the profile. This is called the profile, which is going to be either walking, cycling, or driving. So it's hard-coded in, which is fine for now. These are the coordinates. So we want that to be the coordinates from the marker. So that's why we're going to use an F string. So this is going to be linglat.ling. So that's our longitude, and then our latitude there from this, this object that we have. And then it's hard coded to 15 minutes. That's fine. So in order to actually display the isochrone lines, we need to set a source for the data for the map, and then we need to add a layer, which is going to define how that source is going to be displayed. So this is, again, from the tutorial that I will just copy and paste that code. Yep, here it is. So this is just adding the source. This is the JavaScript. So it doesn't matter where I put it, but so this is adding a source called ISO, and then adding the layer, which we will, and then we will, well, we'll see, we'll add the response, which is our isochrone lines, to be the source. So let's getting ahead of myself again. Let's just convert this to Python. So self.map is our map object. Anything that's a key in a dictionary needs to be a string. I just don't like when things are past the indent, so I'll make sure that's like that. And Python will ignore any semicolons. We can keep them there, get rid of them. So getting rid of these comments. And it's just messy looking. Okay. But the one thing that we actually do need to do is, because we will run this function anytime that we want to display the isochrone. So if we change the time that we want to change the place, we're going to call this function every single time. So we can't just keep adding source and layer. If we've already added the source and we're going to try to add another source with the same name, we're going to get an error. So I'm just going to add this one line. So I'm just going to say if if not self.map get source, so if there's not already a source called ISO, then add it and add the layer. Otherwise, we don't need to do that because we've already have it. So let me make sure, is this all? Okay, it should be lined up. So then we can add the source. So we want our ISO source. So now we can set the data for that source to be the response from the API. Then we can test this out. I'll just call it here when we're moving the marker, just so we can test that this works. And of course, it's just going to be this hard-coded driving in 15 minutes, but that's fine for now. Actually, I just remembered something that I forgot. So we want to make sure that this is going to come back as a JSON object, or else it's not going to work. So I'm just going to make sure that it does by putting JSON equals true. And now it should hopefully work. So that move marker function is called when we search on the geocoder. So I'll just choose a different place. Let's go there. And there's the isochrone line. So that's 15 minutes in driving. So that worked. Excellent.
Thanks.
So now we can actually build a front end for this app so that you can adjust what you're looking at. So we can choose whether we want to drive or walk or ride a bike, and we can choose the time. So we've been in the code view for a while, so we'll switch back to the design view, see the form. So I'm just going to add some drop-down menus. So drag and drop 2 of those. So we can change the name of them, so it'll make it easier to interact with them in code so we know which one is which. So I'm going to call this time drop-down. And then I'm going to call this one profile drop-down, because that's the other argument that we are adding to the Isochrone API. So profile drop-down. So we can set the items for our drop-downs here in the designer if we want to. So I'll do that for the profile. So if I just put, if I just put each item on a separate line, that'll add them to the drop-down. We can also do it in code. So I'll do it in code for this time drop-down one. And there's a reason I'm going to do it in code. And that is because, fumbling around. That's because I actually want the item that's displayed in the dropdown to be different than the value that's returned when you select something. So the way we do that is just, we have our self.time dropdown.items. So that's the items in there. We can set it to be a list of tuples. So the first element in the tuple is what's going to be displayed on the dropdown. So I can have 10 minutes displayed, but I don't want that to be returned. I just want 10, because that is what we add to this. I mean, there's a million ways that you could do this, but if I just pull that 10, then that's what I can just pass into the API request right there. So I'll just add a few more options. So we can do 10 minutes, we can do 20 minutes. And if we have a lot of time on our hands, we can do 30 minutes. Okay, so if I run this, we should see these dropdowns are populated now. Of course, they don't do anything, but we can fix that for sure. So we'll go back to the designer and register an event. So more events. So going down to events, change, clicking these arrows, this will register event for when the dropdown is changed. So clicking that, and we can just call that get ISO function. Self.get ISO, of course. Same thing for the profile. When it's changed, we want to call self.get ISO. However, it's still hard coded, so we can actually change that. So instead of driving, oops. Oh my goodness, I'm clicking too much. I'll just highlight it. Okay, so instead of driving, what we want is that self.profile dropdown selected value. That's what we actually want to pass in. And then for contours minutes, what we want to pass in is self.time dropdown dot selected value. So now, hopefully, when we run this, if I change that, so now we can see this is 10 minutes. If we're riding a bike, 30 minutes, and that works well. If I do this, it should move the marker. And that works. The only thing that we haven't done yet is that if I drag this marker, it's kind of useless because it doesn't actually drag that. So the last thing I'm going to do is just register another event for dragging the marker. So self.marker.on. So we want when the drag event is triggered. And we want to call self.getISO. However, as before, this is going to pass in the result of that drag event into getISO, which doesn't currently take any arguments, so it's going to throw an error. So to avoid that, if you're familiar with Python, you'll know we can just give it this magic star args keyword, and that'll accept an arbitrary amount of arguments. So now this can get passed in, the result can get passed in there, but we won't do anything with it, and we don't need it. So let's see now, if I drag this around. Oh no, that's never happened before. What did I do?
What have we done?
Oh no, oh, I know what's happening. I'm actually, see right now, this is what I've done. It's actually trying to call that function instead of calling it when the drag is happening. So that was, I'm gonna blame the autocompleter for that because that's what happened there. Okay, let's try this. Yay, okay, that looks so much better. Yay.
Oh, cool.
So it should all work now. And we can still fly over and move the marker around. Yeah, and that's it. That's all.
Wow.
We're done. We built this app. And of course you can, change it to look different if you want to, but yeah, it's fully functioning. And it's published. Should already be live. I already made it live, right? Yep. So deployment is done. And yeah, so I don't know if people have questions. I don't know which time we have left. I'm in my own little bubble here.
Yeah, yeah, you did it. I was going to say like, all right, we got 7 minutes. You got it. Yeah, that was incredible. You got a lot of love in the chat for the one publish, the one-click deployment.
Yeah. I mean, some of these things, as a person who doesn't come from web development, like when I first was learning Anvil, I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. And then now I'm learning like how traditional web dev is done. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like I'm so glad I didn't have to learn the other way,
Yeah,
because it's just crazy.
Relatedly, they had a similar experience with the Isochrone API. They're like, oh, I wish I'd known about this for past projects when they used naive point sampling together with the directions API, which is so hardcore. Yeah, you have a question here. From the same person who said, it looks like the marker position, which can be moved client side, has its lat long injected into a request being made from your back end, the Anvil HTTP request. Would you recommend sanitizing the client side input?
So sorry, I'm trying to read the question. I should have listened to you instead of trying to read it at the same time. I mean, I didn't show anything with server codes, but you could do, you could pass things to the server first. I don't know if somebody from my company is on the chat, if they can answer better.
Yeah, I think maybe they're just wondering about, what is the most secure way to transact?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely, obviously this isn't that secure. I've done everything on the client here. I mean, my access token is available to be seen there. Yeah, I mean, but I can show you like adding a server module. We can add server module here. And so we can do anything in a server module, which is going to be secure. So the way that you just make server calls from the client is you just add this anvil.server.callable decorator to your function. So just the classic like hello world thing. So, oops. Return. Now I really can't type. Oh my goodness. So then this can now be called on the client. I don't know if I'm answering the question at all. I don't, what was that? Label one, text. So now we can call it with anvil.server.call. That's the function that's registered on our server. And then we can pass any arguments that we want. Oops, should be a string. So I'll just show. So when that runs now it says hello Mapbox. So that's a server function that we've, that we've used. So if you want things to be secure, there's definitely security added in there. I'm doing everything from the client. So yeah,
that was a cool add-on to your demo.
Yeah.
Folks in the chat are kind of sorting it out and they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, they had a little bit of business conversation about like how new like widgets or components get added. Like, is there a library? Like, can you show us more?
Yes, more components. Is that the question? We do have a component library on our website too that community members have made their own components that you can add into an app.
Very cool.
So I mean, I can try to show that. I'm gonna get the URL wrong, but there's also these other components. There's we have integrations, like I said, with like Stripe, Plotly too.
I have a question here. Okay. Looks like the marker position, which can be moved client side, has its lat long injected into your request. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the same question.
Okay.
Okay. I think your colleague shared AnvilWorks library.
Yes. Okay. So that should be the component library. So there's like a slider element I know that I've used before. There's a lot of different things on there. So yeah, and people are always sharing what they're doing in our forums. So anvil.work/forum is our forum. And people, yeah, they're always showing projects and little bits that they're making and sharing them with people. And some people have also GitHub repos of Anvil stuff that they're doing that's out there, which I think has just been shared as well on the chat. Yeah, beautiful. Anvil extras, yeah.
And there was quite a bit of chat during your demo, just looking at the IDE and looking at the autocomplete and the JavaScript Python. Like people are really just enjoying.
Yeah. So I know with the autocompleter, my colleague Meredith, I think he's done a talk. I don't want to, unless he's about to do a talk. I think he's done or written about the autocompleter. I know he's talked about it on a podcast episode that I listened to, because I do listen to podcasts that he's on. Bonus points. He's my boss, so get bonus points for that.
Oh, I see him in chat. Yeah. Share that podcast.
Yes, I think I don't want to like fumble around on the website and not find something, but I know there's stuff about how the autocompleter works, because it's pretty cool, because it is different since it's all running on the browser. But I don't want to pretend like I know. Oh, yep, it's linked. I don't want to pretend like I know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, you showed us that you know what you're talking about for the last 45 minutes, and we're just about at time.